Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie from StoryADay here, and here we are in June of 2024. At least I am. I don't know when you're listening to this or watching this, but we have just wrapped up the 15th StoryADay May. And now what? I know. I was coming to you during the month with lots of live stuff, all about how the writing was going. And if you were participating, I'm sure that was fascinating. If you weren't participating, maybe it inspired you, or maybe you weren't paying any attention to it because you're in a rest period, or you just didn't want to hear about somebody else's success writing when you weren't having any. I totally get that. But I'm going to talk to you about a bunch of things today that I hope will help you short circuit that response in your brain. We have all struggled with it. When somebody else's work is going well, their creativity is going well, it can be fertile ground for the green-eyed monster. We get envious and we beat ourselves up for not being as productive as that person. All kinds of things can happen that we don't want to happen. They're just happening in our brains and our bodies, and we don't want them to. So one of the things I want to talk to you, the theme for the month of June here at StoryADay is refine. It's part of my iWriter framework, where we talk about your writing in different slices so that we can look at the writing life in different discrete slices and not get overwhelmed by all the things. So I divided the writing life up into these different slices, which are imagine, write, refine, improve, triumph, engage, and repeat. And they all apply at different times in your writing, different processes in your writing, different stages in your writing, and they apply in different ways. So this month I'm going to look at the concept of refining. It's a really good time to do it right now, because if you were writing a lot in May, or if you've ever gone through a phase when you've been writing a lot, you can take what you learned during that writing phase, and you're not going to be able to sustain that pace and intensity of writing forever. So you take a little time afterwards to look at what happened and refine your practice in light of what you just did, what you learned about yourself and your writing, and in light of what season of life you're in, what is going on in the rest of your life, what your goals are, which will change as you go through your life and your writing process. So this month, thinking about refining, it's a nebulous concept, so let me go into it a little better. There's different areas of your writing that you might think about refining, either the systems that you have in place, or your approach to getting started, or how you pursue the things that you want to do. Everything that we do tends to have a system, even if we don't think of ourselves as particularly systematic people. For example, thinking the default system for most people, if they don't stick to their plans, is if I don't stick to my goals, if I don't meet my expectations, then I am going to feel bad about myself and give up and ignore that thing for months so that I don't have to feel bad about myself. That's the default setting in our operating system. And once I point that out to people, they hopefully have a little chuckle, and then they take a look at what could they do to tweak and rewrite that system. I encourage people during the StoryADay challenge to refine that process, that system, to be not, if I fail to write on day 10, then that's it, I've blown up the whole challenge and I'll just try again next year. I encourage people to set themselves a rule at the beginning of the challenge which says something like, if I miss a day, I will write on the next day, or not miss 2 days. And that can be, some people set the challenge so that they are only writing 3 days a week. And this would still apply. If you're planning to write on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you skipped Wednesday, you just forgot, you got busy, something happened, you just decided you weren't going to write that day, the rule would be don't miss Friday as well, right? So the system that we don't think of as a system is happening anyway. I don't think of myself as a systematic or routine person at all. But every morning when I get up, I have a cup of coffee. People always say, oh, do a thing and attach it to brushing your teeth. But brushing my teeth can happen at different times for me. It depends when I wake up. It depends when. But having a coffee somewhere in the hour after I wake up almost always happens. I always wash my hands after I've been in the bathroom. So there's certain things that are just systems that we have in our lives that we don't think of as systems. And sometimes they have developed and they are harming us. Like after lunch, I always want a little snack of something sweet. I don't need it. I need to put a system in place where something good happens after lunch that doesn't involve more food. Oh, that can be systematized. So that's the kind of thing I want to talk about over the next few episodes of the podcast. And the first topic I want to tackle here, because seems like the obvious one after StoryADay May finishes, is how do you figure out which of your stories you want to keep and work on, what you want to do with those ones, and how to let the other ones go. Now, I think some of it is just intuitive. Some of it is just really obvious to you. There will be a lot of things that people wrote during StoryADay May that they are happy to go, that was a really interesting experiment. Don't need to go back to that one. Don't need to save it. Don't need to look at it again. It lived up to my challenge of writing every day. And that's about all I can say about it. And that's fabulous because it did help you build a system where you could write every day for a month. Doesn't matter that the end product was this misshapen little lump of a story. That's fine. There will be some stories which have stuck in your head, maybe one, and you think, I think there's something there, but I'm not sure. How do you find out? This is the point at which you may need some feedback from other people. Now, there are writers in my group, in my Superstars group and in my world, who are writing things that are very personal and very close to them, and they're not ready for feedback. And whenever I bring up the topic of Critique Week, they're apologetic and they're like, I'm not sure if I should. If you're writing a memoir and it's all very close to you, or you wrote a very personal story, or something that you're still working on and molding, and you're still having a productive relationship with it, absolutely do not show it to anyone. If you're not finished with it, if you haven't got stuck yet, it may not be necessary for you or safe for you to get feedback yet. I certainly have had people who've shared things a little too soon in the process and they've been a little burned because, and this happens in a lot of writing groups. It doesn't happen too often in mine because I am quite careful about saying to people, don't share anything or when you do share it. Okay, jumping ahead. Wait for that. I'm going to finish that thought in a minute. But you don't have to share anything before you're ready. There's a difference between knowing you're ready and just being scared to share it. I think the dividing line is if you've done as much as you can with it for the moment, and it's not going to make you cry to talk about it. It doesn't matter if you cry. But if you've gone as far with it as you can at the moment and you're just like, I need some feedback on this, then you can share it with someone. If you're still connected to it and working on it and molding it, then you maybe don't need feedback on it yet. If you think you might have a piece that is ready to get some feedback, there's a couple of things to do. One is to find a place to get feedback. Another is to build a system where you are constantly going to get feedback for your writing. Once you're at that stage where you're writing a fair amount, you're going to need feedback on an ongoing basis, and building a system to get feedback from other people, even if it's just, does this make any sense? Where are the plot holes? That kind of thing is really useful. Does it make any sense is a basic question. Or did this come out of my head onto the page, or did I leave a lot of stuff up there? Is a really valid question. So a system for doing that on a regular basis is really worth developing. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that. I have imposed that system on people in my Superstars group because 3 times a year we get together for what I call Critique Week. And I'll put a link in the description here because it's open at the moment. We're doing it towards the end of June. The registration period is open now, but you can go over to that link anytime you see this or hear this, and you can sign up for the wait list, at which point I'll send you some information. I'll send you reminders for the next one. So that is for my Superstars. They know that every 4 months or so, there's going to be me popping up in front of them going, hey, got anything for critique? And they have to screw their courage up and pick something and get it into whatever shape they want and formulate some questions. Because this is the other thing. I think that you should have a system or a process that you go through when you give someone something for feedback. And the process could be as simple as sending it to them and saying, what do you think? But that's not super productive. You really want to have some questions for people. And the most basic questions, I think you should introduce your piece when you give it to somebody for feedback with a little note saying where it is in the process, e.g., this is super first drafty. I know there's lots of spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes and word choices I'm going to refine later, but I just want to know, does the story work? That's a really useful place to start. You can tell people, this is a super first drafty. I don't need a copy edit right now. I'm looking for big picture things like, does the story work? Are the characters interesting? That kind of thing. If you're at the other end of the process, you can say, I'm getting ready to send this out to a market for potentially publication. I really would appreciate some fine grain feedback on this. Where are the places where I was losing your interest? Think about pacing, think about what questions do you have? So that there's setting the expectation for the people who are giving you feedback about the work, where it is in its process, is very useful. Also, setting people's expectation about where you are as a writer is very useful. This is where I see most people get hurt in critique groups. It is that they have put something into kind of a blind submission critique group, and they're getting feedback from people who are commenting from their own place of readiness. If I have been writing for 15 years and going to critique groups for 15 years, and I've heard all of the suggestions and I'm trying to implement all of that, my writing is in a different place, and I'm looking for a different kind of feedback from someone who is just nervously coming back to their writing for the first time, and they're doing things which I know are going to get slammed by a more experienced writer. Things like, you're showing, not telling. Oh no, you're telling, not showing. Or you're jumping from one perspective to another. If you could tell people, listen, I'm just coming back to writing. The kind of feedback I want, is this even readable? Is it worth my while to pursue this and work on my craft? What bits did you like? What parts of my craft maybe do you think I need to work on next? These could be questions. But if you let people know that you're just like a timid little baby bunny coming back to the edge of the writing garden, then people, if they have any conscience, will give you gentler but still constructive feedback than if you're like, all right, I've been doing this for a while. I'm getting frustrated with the fact that it's getting rejections from editors, and I really need some cold, hard editorial, what the heck is wrong with this kind of critique. It will still be constructive, at least in my group, but it will be much more, it'll just have a different slant. Letting people know, building a process for yourself where you reach out for feedback on a regular basis, and also building a process for yourself where you set up that in a way that you will get the kind of feedback you need. These are things that you can practice. This is a process that you can create, you can refine as you go along, taking the feedback. If you go and send a piece into your local writers group critique and you get blasted with feedback that's just totally not appropriate to where you are in your writing life, you could give up writing, or you could vow to refine your process such that you either don't go back to that writing group again, or you ask the organizer, is it okay for me to put a note at the top of this saying, this is where I am in my process, or this is where my work is in its process, and here's the kind of feedback that I'm looking for. And if the organizer says no, that might not be the group for you. And if the organizer says, hey, that's a great idea, we're going to take that and incorporate it into our processes and procedures, then yay, everybody wins. So refining the process of how you look for and take and ask for feedback is something that is going to result in you getting better feedback and seeing it all as a process. It is how you win. It's not something, this whole writing life is not something that you do once and you get a big win and then you are done. Hopefully, it's an activity that you will continue to do and get joy from for the rest of your life. And one stumble is not the end of the world. One stumble is something that you can learn from. And the next stumble that you're going to make is something that you can learn from. And the next stumble after that, you will learn from. And all of these things will change. And you will, if you are alive and breathing and pushing yourself forward, you're going to continue to make you're going to continue to stumble, because it's when we are down there on the ground that we see the details and we see what needs to happen next. You're always going to be making mistakes. And so we need to keep refining our process. As we level up, we're going to make different mistakes and or have suboptimal experiences. And so we refine our process for that level. And as we level up, there are things that will need refined and changed, not reinvented entirely, just refined. and it's an ongoing process. So in terms of feedback, do you have a system for getting feedback? And does it look like, I want to get feedback on this because I want to know if it's any good and how I can make it better? Oh my goodness, that's too scary. I'm just going to put it away and write something new. That could be your system. That is a lot of people's process. Or is it, I need to find a critique group, but that idea is so overwhelming, I'm just going to not think about it for a while, maybe next year. That is a process. And if you've done it more than once, it's a process. I would suggest that you get yourself either into or on the mailing list for the StoryADay critique group, because it is a place that is very understanding of the stages that people's work and people as writers are in. And it's incredibly constructive and supportive. You can get feedback that is high level from people who think about writing all the time and who are working on their writing seriously. So go over to the link in the description, which is storyaday.org/critique week, and have a think about if you're not going to join a formal group like the critique week, then think about how you could get some feedback on your writing. Do you want to share it with some trusted readers if you have friends who love to read? Do you want to get together with some other writers that you know? I will say that I had a system that was working really well for me for a long time, where I would get together for lunch with some writing buddies who I'd met in another writing group. And while the majority of the members of that group, I would, nice to see them once a month, there were a couple of people there who I really liked and got along with and gelled with. And so we decided we were going to go out for lunch every other week, and we would send each other pages before the lunch, and then we would write. And that worked for a long time. We were writing buddies who got together and held each other accountable. And even if the other person didn't comment on the pages, just knowing you had to send them was a good process. That process broke down a little bit because we went from being just writing buddies to being friends who write, and our lunches got a little looser. And we talk about a lot of stuff, and and we're a little too generous with each other. When somebody hasn't written anything, we're like, I know you're busy. I know you had a grandkid. I know so that process at this point needs a little refinement. And either we need to get more strict with each other, or we need to accept the fact that this is now just a buddy lunch with who like to write. So there are ways to do these. There are different ways to do this. When you are in a formal group where you're investing some cash in the deal, it tends to be a little more motivating because nobody's going to let you off the hook. And you feel the responsibility to the other people in the group to show up, to submit your work on time, to review their work and leave your comments on their work, things like that. So that is also one of the reasons I only run the critique group 3 times a year, because it is a serious commitment. It runs over 10 days, and I don't want people to be overwhelmed by it, but I do want them to have it on a regular schedule so that they know if they aren't ready to put something into the June one, they'll be ready for the October one or the February one. And they know it's coming round again and again, so they can do that. So the perils of doing an ad hoc feedback system is that the system breaks down and there's nothing that requires you to refine the system and make it work again. And you may not want to. I'm not sure I want to crack the whip with my lunch ladies. I like hanging out with them and talking about all kinds of stuff. And probably we have seasons where we're more productive and not. That might be fine for you too. So hopefully that's given you something to think about in terms of, what do you do to get feedback on your writing? What is your current system? Do you have a good system in place? Are you a superstar and you always have something that you put into critique week come hell or high water? Or is it a little more loose than that? Or is your system, I should probably get some feedback on this. Oh my goodness, that's too scary. I'll think about it next year. That's fine for a while, but if you want to make progress in your writing, you're going to have to face up to some of the scary stuff as well. And I endeavor to make the scary stuff at least a little more fun when I run events in StoryADay. So that's what the critique week is all about. I'm not saying it won't be scary, but you will come out of it feeling loved and feeling like your writing is loved and that your writing self has. All right, that's what I have for you on that topic. Stay tuned for more about processes and refining your writing practice. Next, we'll be talking about productivity. May was a very productive month for a lot of us. What now? After that, we will be talking about keeping it going, and that involves celebrating. Keep writing. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.